And we are joined now by two Democrats, Bakari Sellers, CNN political commentator and former South Carolina state representative, and Adam Mockler, who hosts the Adam Mockler podcast. Good to have both of you here. Bakari, let's start first with you, and let's stay in Texas for a second. In that piece, we heard from a spokesperson for Jasmine Crockett saying that Texas Democrats will have to, in their words, do a lot of work outside Central Texas, calling the state one of the largest and most diverse in the world. So to you, what does that look like, and is that feasible to win those voters over?
It's definitely feasible. I think what does it look like is contrary to what a lot of my progressive white liberal friends have been doing day in and day out for the past 3-4 decades, which is simply showing up in black churches and doing fish fries and showing up at HBCU games, after Labor Day of election year. I think James has a unique opportunity to do something different, which is engage. Instead of just engaging Barack Obama and Beyonce and having people put on a hat and a T-shirt. And by the way, I love both 44 and Beyonce. I don't want them in my inbox or their fans in my inbox. Instead, not focusing on the grass tops, but focusing on the grassroots, not focusing on the preachers, but focusing on the pews. He has to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars that he will have building infrastructure in those places that really matters and hoping that his message resonates and actually meeting and listening to voters across Texas.
Yeah, and Adam, Axios this morning called the Senate race the ultimate test of whether the GOP's anti-woke strategy can work. We have seen Ken Paxton and Republicans already trying to paint Tallarico as extreme, as super woke in their words. Do you think that's going to be listen, it worked in 2024 with that ad. And remember the ad that the Trump campaign played against Kamala Harris on transgender issues. Do you think that will work again? And do you think the Tallarico campaign is prepared to push back on that effectively?
Well, it's a strategy that does work, but I think the Republicans are going to struggle to find any moral high ground in this specific race when Ken Paxton is such a uniquely weak and scandal-plagued candidate. Right now, the Tallarico campaign has done a great job of highlighting this specific case where Ken Paxton let a pedophile walk after 29 days when he was supposed to get 25 years to life in prison. So with all of this, I want to not even call it dirt. This is the reality of it. With all of this behind Ken Paxton, I struggle to see how the Republican Party is going to paint James Tallarico making some cringy comments in 2020 as equal. Now, I see the discourse online. They're doing a really, really good job of putting up this offense against Tallarico, but we should have Republicans on their back foot every single day explaining for Ken Paxton's past.
Yeah, Bakari, do you think that Democrats can do that, and can they effectively stay on that message and push back effectively on those criticisms?
I mean, that's me and Adam's task. I mean, me and Adam's task is to tell, Texas voters in the country, the closest thing to Ken Paxton is probably Matt Bevin, where we saw somebody like Andy Beshear, who was a very talented Kentucky governor, coming in that seat. He's not someone who comes to the standard in terms of character of being a United States senator. I mean, he may be president of the United States talking about character, but not a United States senator. And that's our task. That's what we should do daily. That's what people should go out and do daily. James Tallarico needs to go out and tell Texas voters what he's going to do for them. People are tired. Democrats do this weird thing where we try to tell voters about Republicans as if they can't read. We have to tell voters what we're going to do for them. That is the challenge that Democrats have to meet. And honestly, going into November, we haven't done a great job of defining that just yet.
And you're both talking about character and using that as a comparison. I do want to ask about the new reporting from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times surrounding the Maine Democratic Senate candidate, Graham Platner, who allegedly sent sexually explicit messages to women during his marriage. The campaign providing the statement to CNN tonight from Platner's wife, Amy Gertner, in part, quote, "I confided deeply personal details about my marriage to someone I considered a friend. I'm deeply hurt by her betrayal and the invasion of our privacy. Our marriage today is stronger than ever before. I know who Graham is. I know the man I married and the husband he's been to me on the best and worst days of my life. That hasn't changed, and it won't." Adam, look, this is the latest thing in the story of Graham Platner that we can kind of go through all the other ones, but add this to the list. what do Democrats do about this? And is this cause for concern for Democrats?
I mean, of course, it's cause for concern. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to Maine voters. I live in Chicago, so I don't have much say on this election. But if Republicans' main attack is going to be that we can't have an outsider populist candidate who's plagued with scandals in his past, I would just point to basically every single candidate they've been running in the MAGA universe for the past decade or so. But of course, it's not ideal. We want a very electable candidate. I'm not sure if the article was clear whether or not he cheated on his wife or whether they were just texts before the marriage happened.
It was during the marriage. It was during the marriage.
During the marriage?
Were married. Yes.
It's not good. It's not good. Yeah.
Bakari, this comes after.
See, I was like,
Go ahead.
Adam, don't die on that hill, brother. That ain't.
No, I'm not gonna die. It's not good.
That ain't the hill to die on, my brother.
Yeah, it comes after we had our own K-File reporting that he had called himself a communist, that he had denigrated police. He had obviously disavowed those posts afterward, comments where he criticized rape victims, where he had to ask for forgiveness and say he regretted, and covered this symbol on his chest, a tattoo that resembles a Nazi symbol. There is a long list of these things. Is this something you think Democrats are prepared to defend going into the fall?
I mean, you have to be, because we're in the mud right now, and I hate being in the mud. In fact, in South Carolina, we had this saying that you never wrestle with a pig, because you both get muddy and the pig likes it. But here we are. I mean, Donald Trump has just driven the discourse, the culture, the ethics, the morals of this country into a universe where we never thought it. It's kind of beneath where we think we should hold our elected officials to be. Graham Platner is not a good candidate. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, he's just not. In the game of politics, do you want to elect more people than they have? The answer is yes. And so we have to reckon with that. But if Democrats can't just come out and simply say that Graham Platner is not like a good candidate, then we're going to lose we might win a battle, but we'll lose the war. People want honesty. They want authenticity. We deserve to win Maine. I mean, he's a better candidate than the alternative. That says something about the alternative in Maine. But to be completely honest, I'm going with the words of his wife on this particular issue, but everything else in his past, I mean, I need him to have a better understanding of who we are as a country. He needs to have for lack of a better term, come to Jesus. And there has to be an understanding. But Democrats, we cannot allow them to drag us to where they are. I think the country's tired of it, and they're ready to turn the page.
And Adam, just lastly to you on that point, like, do you think essentially the argument is, well, it's if you're a Democrat, like the two of you are, it's worth it to win that battle, to even if, in Bakari's words, this isn't a great candidate, that it's okay for these things, for this to be the candidate, that to be representative of the Democratic Party?
It's not that it's entirely okay, and young men like me shouldn't be looking to people like this for moral leadership, but we're in a race right now where it's him versus a Republican, and he is a better candidate than the Republican. I think the problem here, I agree with everything Bakari said. The problem is that he's not even as bad of a candidate as you're painting him. I know that he's got all of these problems in the past with electability, but he's now a unique populist in the Democratic Party who's got this deep voice and this masculine image and a captivating backstory. And something about that is enough to overcome this past. I feel like in his political campaign, there's a concession that he's an average guy with a plagued past. And now we're seeing that come out. And that's not that Democrats should defend this past or stoop down to this level, but I think that that's part of the concession of the candidate as a whole. So the weird, like, Schrodinger's candidate here is that he's simultaneously resonating with a lot of voters in Maine and across the country, but also simultaneously got this really checkered past. It's very hard to defend.
All right, Adam and Bakari, always great to have both of you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.